their opinion. Sergei Lavrov, as I have already said, will take part in the symposium. He will speak to the symposium section, Multipolar World Future. In his remarks, he will speak about future outlines of the world based on the trends of world development, multipolarity as a norm of international life. He will also encourage the participants to discuss Russia's role as one of the most important poles of the emerging world order. There is no doubt that this symposium will resonate across the whole world because it was initiated as a response to addresses of Russian citizens and of some foreign citizens. They had questions, they had initiatives in order to promote Russia's position in the international context. In order to discuss the most pressing problems of today, we hope that the forum will expand and develop contacts and expert analysis of these subjects, which are very urgent, very pressing for the whole humanity. I have enlisted some of them. On November the 6th, in Sochi, Minister Lavrov will take part in the 21st annual meeting of the International Discussion Club Valdai. This time, they will discuss sustainable peace and free development, equal opportunities, and comprehensive security for the 21st century. Traditionally, the discussion will bring together leading Russian and foreign experts. During the meeting, Minister will give his assessment of the current situation in the world and will comment on the large-scale events and initiatives. He will also explain key Russian initiatives. And, of course, they will hold a Q&A session. From November 6 to November 7, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation will pay a working visit to Kazakhstan. He will hold negotiations with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Vice Prime Minister of Kazakhstan. The parties will pay key attention to the run-up of the scheduled state visit of Vladimir Putin to the Republic of Kazakhstan. According to the spirit of Russian-Kazakh strategic partnership, they will analyze bilateral agenda, relevant international issues of mutual interest, and of course, the parties will exchange opinions according to the cooperation on common integration platforms such as AAU, CSTO, CS, CSSCO. Minister Lavrov will also meet faculty and students of one of Astana universities. As you know, we will keep you updated as we always do. We speak about all the events with the participation of Minister Lavrov. We do not only post announcements, but we issue press releases with photos, videos. Keep updated, follow accounts in social media, and of course our official website. Let us proceed to the relevant international agenda, Ukrainian crisis. On October the 25th, we marked the Day of the Flag of the Donetsk People Republic. Let me remind you that this is the symbol of freedom and unique spirit and courage of the people of Donbass, who continue together with Russia to courageously fight against Ukrainian neo-Nazism, which is in full swing in Ukraine. Today, Russian armed forces are pushing away the front line. They are doing this confidently. They are liberating new settlements, new villages, setting up civilian life, rebuilding civilian infrastructure. We are confident that very soon the day will come when the whole territory of the Donetsk People Republic will be liberated from Bandera soldiers and neo-Nazi ideology. Sooner or later, it will happen in Ukraine in general. because there should be no place for Nazism or neo-Nazism on our planet. At the same time, we see that in front of our eyes, from Nazism and neo-Nazism, this ideology of Bankova, has transformed into international terrorism. Ukrainian Nazis do not stop terrorist attacks against civilians of Russia, launching artillery and drone attacks against civilians. From the period of October 22 to October 29, they launched 410 munitions and 210 drones against civilians. One person died, 8 civilians were injured, 105 residential houses were damaged. At the very same period, in Donetsk People Republic, 1 civilian died, 26 people were injured, including 2 girls born in 2011 and 2012. In Gorlovka, drones damaged a city bus and a school. 3 people were injured. Bandera soldiers deliberately strike civilians and residential buildings. They strike from cannon artillery of NATO caliber. They launched around 255 munitions, including cluster munitions. Let us speak about atrocities in a more detailed manner, because mercenaries from abroad are involved into these atrocities. Our law enforcement agencies receive evidence of war crimes committed by Ukrainian militants in Kursk and other liberated regions. More than 130 Ukrainian soldiers which were captured close to our borders, and they are suspected of being involved into war crimes against civilians. During their retreat from Kursk region, guided by the most villainous motives, the Ukrainian Nazis launched a strike against the Church of Our Lady of the Holy Sign. They also planted explosives close to the door. When the international community speaks not about the annihilation of Orthodox faith in Ukraine, they only rewrite the new sites, the new facilities to the new pseudo-church. Did they plant explosives close to the door for their own congregation? They are not humans. In Chasiv Yar, according to Russian military, they launched deliberate strikes against a group of 6 people who were trying to evacuate. They were trying to escape and they were looking for shelter. Bandera soldiers launched a heavy fire against them. They were cruelly killing those who were trying to escape. The whole group died. Let me reiterate that those were civilians. They were just trying to escape from Bandera soldiers. On the internet, we see some video fragments, some video passages showing that the city dwellers of Ukrainsk speak about bloody executions by Ukrainian soldiers of the civilians who refused to abandon their houses. They also speak about the outrage and the execution of an innocent person in his own house because he refused to take away the ribbon of St. George. We received evidence of the execution by drug-intoxicated Ukrainian soldiers when they were retreating from a Kharkiv village Pilna. We also received evidence about the trade of drugs and medication received as humanitarian aid. This is not an exhaustive list of the Kiev regime. These are just some examples. The investigative authorities of the Russian Federation record all the crimes and all the guilty will be held responsible. Russian tribunals, on the basis of the evidence collected by the investigative committee, announce sentences to Ukrainian Nazis and mercenaries. Ukrainian soldier Khmara was sentenced to 22 years in prison for executing a Mariupol city dweller in March 2022. A militant of Ukrainian armed forces, Yermolenko, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. His accomplices, Pavlovsky and Petrov, received 24 years. For the mortar shelling of a village, Mirny, of Kalmyky district of the city of Mariupol, 25 years of sentence in absence received a Sweden mercenary, Mikhail, for taking part on the side of the Ukraine, of the Kiev regime, as part of a Nazi group in Azov against militants of the Donetsk People Republic, and in 2022 as a special operation of Ukraine against Donbass and the Russian armed forces. Georgian mercenaries Patrick and Burduli received 14 years in prison. Kinoniani received 7 years in prison. All the so-called soldiers of fortune are placed on the international wanted list. As of today, we have finalized the consideration of 58 criminal cases, and they all are found guilty. I'm speaking now about the number of mercenaries and the number of sentences when it comes to mercenaries. None of the criminals will be able to escape responsibility. And the facts of the degradation of humanity, the representatives of the Russian Federation spoke about this during the non-formal session of the UN Security Council in Area Formula in order to discuss systemic violations by the Ukrainian armed forces of international humanitarian law on the territory of the Russian Federation. On October 25 in New York, we initiated such a meeting within the UN Security Council. The speakers were our ambassador at large, Rodion Miroshnik, and the head of International Tribunal on Ukrainian Crimes, Maxim Grigoryev, a village dweller of the village Giri, Alexander Zuyev, who was a witness to these crimes. He also spoke about it. The meeting listened and watched the numerous evidence of the crimes against civilians, which fully testifies to the terrorist and Nazi essence of the Kiev regime. Our ambassador at large showed abhorrent statistics of the crimes based on facts. Since the beginning of 2024, Ukrainian Nazis launched more than 1,700 of munitions. 4,733 civilians were injured, and 718 died. Bandera soldiers deliberately eliminated communications. They launched airstrikes against bridges, against roads, in order to cut the ways for evacuation. They forcefully detained civilians. Maxim Grigoryev demonstrated some videos of the interview with the people who fell victim to atrocities of Ukrainian armed forces. These video materials, which testify to the Nazi essence of atrocities of Ukrainian Nazis, executions of civilians, looting, mining of villages and civilian infrastructure. Now, I have spoken about the church where they planted explosives. Alexander Zuyev spoke about deliberate attacks of Ukrainian armed forces using drones against civilian infrastructure. They completely burnt 20 houses. In order to inflict additional suffering to the dwellers of this village, they also mined and planted explosives in the suburbs. There was no military essence, there was no military benefit in such actions. The only goal was to punish the local village dwellers. This is what they did 80 years ago. The speakers also reaffirmed the criminal role of the West.
They heavily supply weapons to Kiev regime and cynically turn a blind eye to the participants in these crimes, to the perpetrators. I would remind these crimes will be prosecuted without any restricted time frame. And there were no objections just to justify, for justifications. We will continue to convey the truth about the Ukrainian army crimes to the global community that are impossible to conceal, to hide. It will be an eternal reminder of this shame. Those Western representatives and regimes and aggressive blocs who have developed this project named Kiev regime and anti-Russia and launched all that. And we have drawn attention in the same context on publications in Western media on the 27th of October with testimony by the witnesses about the Ukrainian army crimes against civilians in the Kursk region. Of course, the West has no arguments, but there is a lot of slander, just a dirty slander, Russophobic rhetoric. They just compete in that by making unsubstantiated accusations against our country. The so-called Euro diplomacy had Josep Borrell, who is leaving his post. His comments made comments 10 days ago, insinuations against our country in killing the prisoners of war, Ukrainian militants. And these are substantiated statements. They try to multiply them by the European Union parliament members try to multiply them. They act according to the methods to slander our country, to keep repeating those lies in order for them to become the truth. But actually, they are not interested in facts. They are not interested in many crimes of the Kiev Nazis with regard to non-combatants or prisoners of war. There are videos of torture, of killings of Russian prisoners of war. They are on the internet and social media. And it's not some materials that have been obtained from somewhere. This coverage has been published by the perpetrators of those executions. These are the materials published by mercenaries on social media that have become witnesses of those crimes. They participated in those crimes and published those materials themselves. And there are links in Western media. But the Western politicians are not interested in that at all. Their thoughts, their words have just one aim: Russophobia. As they put it, strategically defeating our country. And they just speak about it openly. It's their major idea. I would repeat, they will not succeed in that because many political adventurers have cherished such plans for centuries, who were seeking global dominance, who needed our territory, who needed to defeat us or destroy. They have not managed to defeat Russia, and they will not manage to do that now. It has been proved by history itself. In this anger, they just strike civilians, children and women, those who are less protected. And the Russian language, it also suffers from that. We have drawn attention to increasing discrimination against the Russian language, and actually the proclaimed destruction of the Russian language in Ukraine. It obtains more and more perverted forms. Taras Kremen, the Ukrainian language ombudsman, has said on the 24th of October that soft Ukrainization has been replaced by offensive Ukrainization, which provides for strict control over compliance with language law in all spheres of public life in Ukraine without exception. Have you seen such conference, some statements that in order to protect one language, you need to destroy another language? It has existed only in the Third Reich and nowhere else. Now it's all about the ideology disseminated by the Kiev regime. The ban to use the Russian language that has existed before, to use it somewhere else, only at except for at home. It has been soft language discrimination according to Crimean. And now those who risk to say something in their mother tongue, I would stress that mother tongue, fines will not be applied to them as before. Those officials, those Bankova representatives, they will adopt repressive measures, strict measures. Maybe they will be imprisoned or medically treated, compulsory medical treatment. It's not a slip of the tongue. Crimean had said that. He called bilingual people those suffering from linguistic schizophrenia. And it's interesting, Trudeau, Canadian Prime Minister, does he know that how his patrons call those who have two mother tongues? And in UNESCO, Madame Azoulay, whose mandate is not only the protection of culture but also language issues. Has she heard anything like about bilinguals, those children whose mother and father have different mother tongues, different languages? They have a possibility to speak two languages. And from the point of view of the Kiev regime, there are representatives who suffer from linguistic schizophrenia. And in Switzerland, are they aware to whom they are passing not only humanitarian aid, but supporting by all means? In Switzerland, do they know how bilingual persons are called? They seem not to be aware of that. So let them read about that. I don't know how to call him, Sprechenführer, how to call that person, Crimean. I don't know how to call him because it's beastly things. And what is more beastly, Crimean himself said that he continues to use the non-state language as well. So maybe if he suffers from schizophrenia, he should be treated and not to offend other people. So it's just actually the policy of the Kiev regime, actually implemented by them. What will the further measures be to catch those who are not attentive, their compatriots who speak in a different language? They will be caught by inspectors who have begun their work in some cities in Ukraine. Have you seen such language inspections somewhere, apart from the Third Reich? I also know the historic examples of the atrocities of also Western troops in various places in the world. But I have never heard even an occupation of some country when they made people speak some other language, not their mother tongue. But they are carrying on this experiment in Ukraine. If those language inspectors will patrol the streets together with enlistment office staff, I will not be surprised by that, in order to kill two birds with one stone. Just remember, Former Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Danilov, said, quote, "The Russian language should completely disappear from the territory of Ukraine." But they have not guessed how they will be able to do that. The Kiev regime will just kill those people. These facts once again confirm the relevance of the special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine and to destroy the threats from its territory. And as it has been said many times, those aims will all be fulfilled. And we have drawn attention to the British accusations by Keir Starmer of the Russian armed forces, accusations of strikes against Ukrainian port infrastructure in order to make harm to the global food security. Such accusations by London are another testimony of the opposite. The direct participation of Great Britain in supplies to Kiev regime with the use of the Black Sea corridor. Such video proof has been recently published by the Ministry of Defense of our country, Russian Ministry of Defense, that proves the absurdity of those accusations by London. We consider this unhealthy reaction by British authority as a confirmation of their true motives. It's not supplying grain, it's just supplying weapons, lethal weapons to the Kiev gang. They are doing their best to prolong the conflict and prolong the suffering of the Ukrainian people. And I would note that these insinuations, our embassy has commented them, and we will post a link in the text of the today briefing. Now Moldova, you know, in several days, on the 3rd of November, the second round of the presidential elections will take place there. This election campaign is characterized by unprecedented repressions, lack of democracy, non-compliance with the norms. It's just repressions against politicians, against public figures and people who are trying to defend their rights. It's repressions against opposition, independent media, administrative resources, official Chisinau. It does not think it necessary to conceal in those allegedly election procedures. And it's with the large-scale interference of the collective West in the domestic affairs of the Republic. And it's done allegedly to counter the some imagined Russian threat. But we see that these falsificated results of the alleged referendum have demonstrated that no matter how much the official Chisinau makes its efforts to deceive people, it will not succeed, because the results have been a failure for the official Chisinau, because the citizens, the people in Moldova, they understand everything very well. They remember their history. It's the glorious history of their country and of their people. They remember that it is closely connected with Russia. And now our country and our people, it's just demonstrated. They just invent some fairy tales about our country nearly being an enemy. They remember what unites us, actually. This common history from the times of Dmitry Kantemir, when our country was a reliable friend and played a significant role in the preservation and development of the Moldovan statehood, national identity. Let us provide the facts. After signing in May 1812 of the Bucharest Peace Treaty, the territory between the Dniester and the Prut, Bessarabia, became part of the Russian Empire, and the Moldovan lands destroyed by war began to be restored, from 1819 to 1859, the number of the Moldovans grew from 43,000 to 196,000 people. Just count for yourself in how many times this population multiplied just for a short period of time. From 1812 to 1917, the total number of population grew by 7.5 times. According to the census of 1897, the Bessarabia area became one of the most populated territories in Russia, and the grain production grew in more than 5 times. It was the production of food and technical products grew. In 1859, the grape production grew significantly, and the production of wine grew multiplied 3 times. The transport system in Bessarabia was actively developing. In 1917, the Benderi depot had 253 trains, and it was the largest depot in Southwestern Railway system. The spiritual life was also thriving, and there were more than 400 schools of different types in Bessarabia. The school books were delivered from St. Petersburg. Some of them were written and published in Chisinau itself. It's real history of the Moldovans, and not the history invented in the West and delivered by Sandow and all those who is pushed by the West and inventing those anti-Russian stories. Now, the Soviet period. Yes, there were problems, but we suffered together, and there were many great achievements. It was the highest point of the development of, with regard to creativity and culture of the Republic. The creativity and art and literature were promoted, and it also was reflected in the well-being of the people and the demographic situation. The population of the Moldovan Soviet Socialist Republic grew nearly by 77% from 1940 to 1990, from 2.46 to 4.36 million people. Just think about that. From 1940, these were also, among other things, the years of the bloodiest war. For the victory in that war, the Moldovans sacrificed their lives, and despite that, the demography, it just grew with such rates. And the base that has been made in Soviet time, it was for the Moldovan economy for decades. And it remained, Russia remained a reliable partner for Moldova and for its people. We have cultural, humanitarian, and also human ties. The Moldovan diaspora in Russia includes up to 500,000 people, and on the banks of the Dniester, up to 220,000 Russian citizens live. For the Moldovans, Russia is a good place for study, work, medical services, and there are so many joint families. How many people in Russia, in Moldova, just do not divide those peoples, but just live together with pleasure. And against that, they have launched the campaign, the Sandu regime has launched this campaign. We value such relations with the Moldovans and collectively do our best in order to our actions not to affect the common citizens in Moldova.
Despite that, Moldova joined economic sanctions launched against our state, the so-called damage register. We fully respect our obligations in line with the gas contract signed in October 2021. Thanks to this contract, Moldova receives cheap electric energy generated from the state power plant of Moldova. The whole history of Moldova testifies to the fact that key to preserving its sovereignty and national identity is maintaining good neighborly relations with Russia based on the principles of equality, mutual respect, and mutual benefit. This goes in line with the root interests of the peoples of our states, which have very close historic and humanitarian ties. We want to preserve the development of friendly ties with Moldovan people. The second round, whether we can say that it would correspond to the democratic norms, taking into consideration what has been going on in Moldova for the last decades and for the last recent days, how could we forget everything that has already been done, all those repressions against people who just have their own point of view and they are being attacked with the help of Western funds, those who now are in Moldova hiding under their official status. I wish resilience, courage, and faith. Believe in your energy, believe in your state, believe in history, believe in your identity. I wish all of this to Moldovan people. Speaking about lies, we have just discussed how they lie, that Russia is an enemy to Moldova. Let's analyze what is going on next. Fake news. Fake news about Russian biological activity in American mass media. We believe it to be a propaganda of the United States in order to undermine Russia's credibility and its biological activities. Washington, once again, basing on assumptions, churns out non-substantiated claims towards Moscow in regard to the so-called military biological program and the violation of BTVC. Are there any substantiations? We consider that these fake news are a mere attempt to divert the attention of the international community from the non-transparent and malicious actions of the United States, from the violations of BTWC, and we have many examples in Ukraine. The analysis of projects carried out in Ukrainian laboratories give us every reason to say that in the very proximity to Russia's borders, they developed components to biological weapons, so we should receive the response. We would do everything possible that the United States, which is one of the depositories of the Convention, respects its obligations. Let me reiterate that Russia's actions are of peaceful purpose only, and they go in line with international law, including the Convention. We reaffirm this by presenting information as part of confidence-building measures as part of the Convention. We will consistently advocate for the reinforcement of this convention by renewing our efforts on elaborating legally binding protocols to the convention with an effective verification mechanism. This initiative has been blocked by the United States. We will further insist on implementing Russia's initiatives aimed at consolidating institutional foundations of the Convention. Of course, our suggestions and our initiatives to form a mechanism of possible violations of the Convention. And of course, we have to improve the confidence-building measures and include annual reporting, considering the military and biological activities of member states abroad. And our favorite subject to discuss, we have something to share, the so-called International Criminal Court. I will share many interesting facts, you won't believe it. They are the role model of international law. This is the very structure, these are the very people who were going to issue arrest orders against our political leaders, against the leader of our state. Let us begin. On October the 28th, the General Assembly of the United Nations Organization considered an annual report of the so-called mechanism called International Criminal Court. This report only reaffirmed our conclusions. This body is nothing but a manifestation of double standards and ineffectiveness and of hypocrisy. For good, it lost its right to be called the institution of justice. It was transformed into the obedient tool of Western states to promote their geopolitical goals, to erode international law. It is biased, it is unilateral. The so-called justice, and we can see it from its attitude to numerous war crimes of NATO states in Afghanistan, in Libya and Iraq. The International Criminal Court has been thoroughly trying to sweep under the carpet the horrifying atrocities of NATO troops, and many non-governmental organizations said that there were millions of victims. I mean, they killed people, they killed civilians only in Iraq. At the same time, there were no sentences. No one asked for any arrest orders. The International Criminal Court utterly failed the consideration of the situation in Libya and Darfur. These fake news in Libya were used in order to justify the unprovoked armed aggression of NATO against the state. In Darfur, the illegitimate attempt of this so-called court to bring to responsibility the acting head of state only hindered peace process and triggered a large-scale crisis with the African states. The morbid interest in African states made the African Union to elaborate a strategy to withdraw from the Roman Statute. Due to the Western pressure, it was not fully implemented, but the further trajectory of the International Criminal Court only reaffirmed that this was a very sensible decision. Just some facts. This pseudo-court possesses an annual budget of $200 million, which is 7 times more than the main court, the International Court of the United Nations Organization. Against this backdrop, the constant complaints, considering the lack of funds, demonstrate the dysfunctional character and blatant lack of professionalism. I should also state that there is a non-transparent character of the allegedly voluntary donations. And, of course, the support by assigning some millions of dollars to the International Criminal Court for the investigations against the collective West. If they have to find something out, they find personnel, they find funds. If this subject is not relevant for the West, they send no personnel, they send no funds. This court is only a cover for the United States and their satellite states. The position of Washington is very illustrative in order to understand the essence of the International Criminal Court. They are not a party to the Roman Statute, but when it serves their interest rights, they are trying to involve this body to act against their enemies. In some other cases, they threatened the International Criminal Court with sanctions. Once they were implemented, they were imposed when the prosecutor's office of the International Criminal Court refused to investigate crimes against Palestinians. The United States imposes a great number of limits on cooperation with International Criminal Court, including the act, the so-called Law on the Seizure of the Hague, in order to use any means, including the use of force, to liberate Americans and their allies detained by the International Criminal Court. They do not merely legalize criminal activities. It is impunity, and they present it as law. In 2022, Americans envisaged some exceptions in order to elaborate the Ukrainian case. Of course, there would be no similar exclusions in order to investigate war crimes in Palestine. But during the General Assembly in the United Nations, we heard some blatant declarations of the American delegation that the United States allegedly condemned the pressure on the International Criminal Court. How is this possible that Washington has conceived many tricks against the International Criminal Court? They introduced anti-International Criminal Court legislation, and afterwards they hurry up to the United Nations and they say that we should exercise no pressure over the International Criminal Court, that this is a perfect body. And the real theater of absurdity. The recent story with ratification of the Roman Statute of Ukrainian. Why should I say this? Because the Kiev regime managed to ratify the Roman Statute with a clause that during 7 years, ICC would have no jurisdiction when it comes to war crimes committed by Ukrainian citizens. How beautiful. A very good structure, a very good body from the point of view of the Ukrainian regime, but only one condition. They will be a part of this organization without a possibility of being an indictee. This is a masterpiece. This all is going on against a backdrop of an armed conflict when controlled by Kiev regime, militants, mercenaries have already committed a good number of war crimes documented by law enforcement agencies. We speak about them every day, and they keep committing these crimes, not only in Ukraine, but on other continents. Look at Africa. In essence, the West has provided the Kiev regime with an indulgence. Now, any party can follow the example of the Kiev regime. They can sign the Roman Statute and then exclude their own responsibility and use the statute as a political weapon against some other party. I believe that this is nothing but the kingdom of crooked mirrors. This is a distorted, a perverse idea of the law and of what is legal. Where is the professional international community, international organizations? They all are dominated by Anglo-Saxon representatives and professional lawyers all over the world. Where are they? They have their own associations, they hold regular conferences and sessions in order to discuss the latest details of international law. These are not latest details, this is a blatant outrage. Where are those who speak that we need to find impunity? This is not a mere impunity. They legitimize impunity. They have transformed into a theatrical play the maneuvers of ICC when it came to the situation in Palestine. First, the Prosecutor General from Great Britain touted in all mass media about an issue of arrest warrants against Israeli leaders, and then Great Britain itself slowed down this process. They found some hints into Palestino-Israeli agreements, some clauses that question the mandate of ICC in this case. Eventually, they are involved into finding out the limits to their mandate in The Hague. Their objective is evident: shadow boxing. Let me remind you that the investigation of this situation in Palestine has been investigated by ICC for 10 years. And the previous year, this was nothing but shadow boxing. The Gaza Strip is the center of a humanitarian catastrophe, and the ICC does nothing. They demonstrate either inaction or hypocrisy. The West and their accomplices reaffirm that this body has nothing to do with justice. And of course, I cannot but comment on the news of the ICC website that they launched an investigation of its own Prosecutor General. Let me remind you, he's a British citizen. Mr. Han, what do you think he is accused of? To my mind, this is nonsense, but just think of it. International Criminal Court is headed by a person who is accused of sexual harassment. Perhaps you would say, we have already seen something similar. We have heard the surname Han, ICC, and sexual harassments. No, it was not the case. Then they spoke about his brother. It was just on the eve of issuing this scandalous arrest orders against Russian leaders. And then the brother of the persecutor Han, another Han, he was released. He received an early release from prison when he was serving his sentence for a similar crime. Such a merry, perverse family. And now they are in the head of the body that should exercise justice all over the world. And this mishapen construction of the Roman statute make the persecuted the central figure of the ICC. It is him who decides what cases should be investigated and what should be the pace of investigation, how they should distribute funds. Without the persecutor, no case will be referred to judges. It is very convenient for the West to have such a demoralized person in this position. So much room for blackmail and for manipulation. When they need the right solution to be made, they release his brother. And then when they needed some other manipulations, they started to escalate the situation around his own case. This is very simple. Remember that Minister Lavrov has repeatedly stated that the decisions made by many states and their representatives in international organizations are pushed through by the West, by blackmail, by threats, by direct pressure. This is an example how they do this. And of course, we cannot understand how facing these facts, many states of the global south still harbor some hopes that the ICC will make some positive contribution to eradicate the most severe international crimes. Of course, the United Nations Assembly automatically adopted a laudatory resolution. Russia voted against the resolution. The document has nothing to do with the reality. Even the 17 ICC members understand this. They refused to vote in favor of the resolution, and the number of such participants has increased over the year. We call upon all the responsible members of the international community to fight together against blackmail and dictate of the collective West, to cast off these shackles, to be free. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is worth doing. We cannot afford a planet fall victim to a puppet body that does not show justice, but just the opposite. We had some questions regarding the messages of the Europol of eliminating organized crime group. They published this press release on October the 24th. They allegedly eliminated the organized crime group on the Belarus and Poland border.
Национальный трансграничный характер является основополагающей задачей.
We believe that it's a transborder issue, and the issue of transborder organized crime, and the relevant decision was taken by the General Assembly of the United Nations in the year 2000, and it should be done together. It should be done by uniting the forces, and we see here another Russophobic hysteria. It's some, demonstrative showing off of, as they say, a Russian trace. Naturally, it has nothing to do with the tasks that stand before the Europol, and it's connected with the EU fight, as they say, with hybrid threats allegedly from our country. It's the justification of their own illegal actions. In this context, Europol, as a politicized European structure, acts as another instrument against Russia. It's just harmful for themselves. It's dangerous for themselves. I would remind that Europol has always been politically engaged, and it has grown significantly recently. They have unjustified data on circumstances and people who allegedly participated in crimes in Europe. The aim is to calm down the voters in the European countries who are concerned about the illegal migrations and the crime connected with that. And from their point of view, the perpetrators are primarily the Russians and the Belarusians, because Europol pays no attention to a colossal demand in Europe for cheap and often illegal working force, because many countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, they have suffered from the collective foreign policy of the West. And The Hague just keeps that silent. Those statements formulated that way, they are needed to justify the horrible mistakes, miscalculations that are made to look like political decisions, but they are actually the reasons of many troubles the European Union is now experiencing because of the foreign policy failure. Now about the elections in Uzbekistan, because there were our observers on the 27th of October, there were legislative elections. in Majlis, the parliament of the country. It was the first time those elections were held in according with the mixed system. 75 seats according to party lists and 75 seats for one mandate areas. Why, with invitation of the Uzbekistan side, the Russian observers acted as representatives of observer missions, CIS, SCO, OSCE, and as well as non-governmental organizations, Central Electoral Commission, and Federal Assembly. The elections were held in full compliance with the election code of Uzbekistan and without any serious violations. The outcome of the vote reflects the will of the Uzbekistan people, and I would like to congratulate the people of Uzbekistan. Some words about the Russian participation in the UN Global Program in Central Asia countries. Is one of the most successful and effective forms of the cooperation of Russia and the Global Food Program. It's about the food for school children. The aim is to help the developing countries create their own system of feeding, providing food for school children. It's material technical cooperation, creating the necessary infrastructure like kitchens, places to eat, even gardens, and places to grow food at schools. And this program is conveyed to the local and national authorities. Russia has implemented such projects worth more than 120 million US dollars. And the most large-scale programs have been in Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. In Tajikistan, since 2013, Russia has spent more than $28 million for this school food program. And the school children in Tajikistan, it's about 450,000 school children in 2,000 schools in 53 areas of the Republic of Tajikistan. 55 kitchens have been renovated, and they will be transferred to the government of Tajikistan and will be financed according to the state budget. Russia also finances projects in Nicaragua, Cuba, Jordan, Cambodia, Laos, and Sri Lanka, and has also spent some funds for cooperation in the sphere with Syria. Funds were allocated as well as in Mozambique. It's a 5-year program, and the total sum is $40 million. The autonomous non-commercial organization or the Institute of Food acts as a subcontractor in this program that has proved its efficiency also in the CIS. Good news, it's the Russian prize for the development of science. It's in order to raise the prestige of working in the sphere, and it was the first time the prize was allocated and it was named after Konstantin Tsiolkovsky and called Russian Science for Peace. And the first winner in this area was our international partner, Festival Science Zero Plus. It's a major teaching project that is implemented from 2006, both in Russia and abroad. Its aims are to provide teaching for school children, students, young scientists, and to establish dialogue between science and the society. For the whole time of holding the festival events, around 20 million visitors were engaged, and the international festivals Science Zero Plus were held in Belarus and China. Events are being prepared in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and for the first time in Cuba. The geography is being enlarged, and we will do our best to implement this project in friendly countries, despite all artificial obstacles created by the West. In some way, they try to create those obstacles in our way, and we understand very well it's not easy. But we value those representatives of the scientific circles, non-governmental organizations who overcome all those obstacles. Some very important dates: the 7th of October 1944, liberation of motherland from the Nazi German invaders, the Kirkenes operation of the Red Army. The task was to knock the enemy army out of the Soviet polar regions in the far north and to provide assistance to Norway. The offensive was carried out by the units of the Karelian Front with the support of the Northern Fleet formations. By the 29th of October, tens of settlements were liberated, including the towns of Petsamo, Kirkenes, Naden, and on the 1st of November, the hostilities in the Arctic region were finished. The Petsamo-Kirkenes operation has become a symbol of the heroism and of the Soviet army, and as the King of Norway wrote, the war was won by the Red Army in the Eastern Front, and the victory led to the liberation of the Norway territory in the north. Unfortunately, Norway has become one of the most hostile countries towards Russia, and aggravating the situation in the Arctic by supporting the militarization of the north and transforming it into a testing ground of NATO. It's militarized, and the military budget is being increased, and they deploy foreign military bases on their territory, and they provide a basis for military drills with allies in the northern regions close to the Russian border. Norway has turned into a testing ground for military drills by NATO countries in far northern regions, and they do not conceal their targets. It is us. 20,000 servicemen took part in military drills Nordic Response 2024. This scenario was the occupation by some state that is situated to the east of Norway. Who could that be? And the responsibility for those military aims is passed to our country traditionally. Maybe the Norwegian citizens are not aware how they are used. Unfortunately, we observe the Norway authorities discrediting our common heritage by providing biased interpretations of the liberation of the northeast of Norway by the Red Army in 1945 and October-November 1945. I would like to warn you against the rewriting of history. You should study history as it was, and such pseudo-historical inventions, they just discredit the modern Norwegian authors and put their professional competencies under doubt. The diplomatic staff of the Kirkenes Russian Consulate General, despite the colossal psychological pressure by the local Russophobic elements, laid flowers and wreaths at the memorial of the Soviet soldier. We are grateful to everyone who participated in that event, who came from the bottom of the heart to honor the memory of the heroes. And we have in Russia the marked envelope was issued. 80 years of the liberation of the Soviet Arctic region and northern Norway during the Petsamok-Kirkenes operation. On the 1st of November, the national holiday is marked in Algeria. On this date in 1954, the military fight of the Algerian people for independence began. It ended in 1962 by the proclamation of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria and the Evian ceasefire accords, and it was an end to the 132-year French colonization of Algeria. The victims of this war were 1.5 million of the Algerian people. Now Algeria is the recognized local leader and participates in the work of the African Union, the League of Arab States, and other multilateral associations. The declaration on the profound strategic partnership was signed in June last year between our countries. We developed a multidimensional cooperation in trade, economic, military, technical, cultural, humanitarian, and other spheres. We would like to wish peace, prosperity, and security to our Algerian friends on this date of the 70th anniversary. Yesterday, on the 29th of October, it was the 95th birthday of Yevgeny Primakov, a prominent figure who was the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 1996 till 1998, will post material on the media resources of the Foreign Ministry. I know you are well aware of many memoirs on Yevgeny Primakov, and it's important to study his works, his heritage, the etymology of Middle East crisis, the dynamics, the ground causes, the root causes of global conflicts, and we will post a link on his works in the text of the today's briefing. On the coming date, on the 2nd of November, for the 11th time, we will mark the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. It was enshrined by the UN General Assembly on the 2nd of November in 2013. The decision of the 68th session of the UN General Assembly. And the irony is about the crimes in the media sphere. This situation, it has not improved, but it's just degrading. It's just some fall of some norms, some rules of lawlessness of morale, its unconcealed terrorist actions. And 4 more Russian journalists were killed: Boris Maksudov, Semyon Yeremin, Valery Kozhin, Nikita Tsitsagi. They just miraculously survived the targeted attacks of the Ukrainian drones. Yevgeny Podobny, they miraculously survived, and Alexei Ivlev. The Russian military correspondents are actually being hunted. This symbol, press on the clothes, now it does not protect from the threats of death. It's just some sign to be a target that it stuck to the clothes of the journalists. And they were the first to be targeted by those who have proclaimed war against the freedom and also the freedom of speech. And the first in this struggle of the truth and the lie, the struggle of the world for the freedom from lack of truth, unfortunately, they lose their lives. Our Russian journalists lose their lives under the targeted fire of the neo-Nazi murderers, the perpetrators of these terrorist attacks. There is not only lack of persecution by the Zelensky regime or some political condemnation. No, they are just being justified. Their bloody attacks are being justified.
Early this year, we learned that a journalist from Chile, Gonzalo Lira, he died in an American prison. He was tortured, and they killed him. They tortured him to death. Since then, we saw no sign of the fact that those responsible for this horrific crime, and they did kill a journalist for his ideas and for his professional activities, we saw no sign that they are trying to bring anyone to responsibility. On the contrary, the authorities of the United States and Chile, they just went on as if nothing had happened. They included this fact in no reviews, they published no press releases, they held no press conferences, they initiated no prizes named after him in order to inscribe into history the memory of the person who was a professional journalist and who was violently killed for the cause. For many years, our state, Russia, has been calling for stopping the activities of the terrorist platform, the Peacekeeper. Using this platform, the Kiev regime identifies its ideological opponents and chooses the targets for elimination, and then puts the marks against the names of those whom they have killed. The servers of this platform is a database for killers who are located on the territory of the so-called advanced democracies, US and Canada, who could have demonstrated they are committed to their obligations to protect journalists and to hinder these crimes from happening. But these resources still operate, and they have invested all their efforts of this repressive machine in order to bully Julian Assange and to make him to buy out his freedom to confess confess being guilty for the crime he had not committed. And this is what was told within the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. This is impunity, it and of itself. A new spiral of escalation of the conflict on the Middle East resulted in a human tragedy, and taking lives of dozens of thousands of civilians, and many journalists died in the conflict. According to the most moderate estimations, around 1,500 journalists died in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon. Last week, we commented on the death of 3 Lebanese journalists as a result of an airstrike against the residential area in the south of Lebanon. Are there any signs that this is about to end? No, we receive the opposite signs that the journalists will be the first who will be exterminated by those who speak in favor of journalism and security, but in practice they stamp out any dissent and any manifestations of dissent by professional journalist methods, or so to speak, by using new media such as bloggers and so on. This is what is happening, goes in contrast with what is celebrated by international ideals and by the day which was established. Those who have to fight impunity turned into criminals who stamp out any dissent, impose political censorship. They cast away hypocritically all international obligations, so considering the free access to information. West, with its own hands, creates a conducive environment for this impunity, for this outrage. They give pardon to itself, to their subordinates, any acts of terrorism, any persecution of journalists who do not serve their interests. They can afford everything. They use their financial capacity in specialized human rights structures. Washington and its allies merely paralyzed the whole system of guaranteeing media freedom. They made everyone silent. They trampled on all the norms and all the institutions. A couple of years ago, those institutions could say something, they could voice their opinion and write a few lines in social media. At their command, the international officials, when they should respond, they are silent. Or they pose some false claims to those who are enemies and opponents to the West. The International Day of Ending Impunity to crimes against journalists will regain its original mission when all the international obligations will be carried out in their entirety and interconnectedness with all the states without any exception. If it is not the case, this day will degenerate, and this date will mean nothing, or this will be a reproach to the whole international community, because the idea was like this, the idea was very noble, and it failed. Now we will speak about the most important day for our state. It is the Day of People's Unity, which is associated with the liberation of Moscow from Polish invaders in 1612. At the beginning of the 17th century, the Russian state was going through one of the most difficult periods of its history, the time of troubles, when Fodor, the last sovereign of the Rhetoric dynasty, died. As a result of plots, coups d'etats, interventions, the rulers changed one another. On November the 4th, 1612, the village chief Kuzma Minin and Prince Dmitry Pozharsky came to lead the popular rebellion and they liberated Moscow from Polish invaders. The rebellion brought together the representatives of different social classes, peoples, and denominations, which gave a powerful impetus to revive the Russian statehood. In order to commemorate this heroic deed in 1818, at the decree of the Emperor Alexander I, they erected the monument to Citizen Minin and Prince Pozharsky. This is a remarkable masterpiece of a Russian sculptor, Ivan Martas. This is the first monument in Russia's history, not to a military leader or to a ruler, but to popular heroes. Every year, the grateful posterity lays flowers to this monument. In line with the federal law, we celebrate this holiday since 2005, and this is a tribute to the glorious past of our fatherland. This is an important symbol and reminder of our unity in the most difficult times. We are proud to celebrate this event with respect to our predecessors. Unity and harmony, loyalty to traditions and moral values. These are the key conditions to consistent and dynamic development of our state, peaceful civilian life, trust in future. Today, against the backdrop of the large-scale anti-Russia campaign unleashed by the collective West, this is as relevant as never before. As was noted by Russia's President Vladimir Putin, traditionally we take care of the fatherland, we are committed to defend it, and this is inherent with our million-strong and multinational people. And let's go on to the Q&A session. Международная жизнь, are you with us? Good afternoon, Ms. Zakharova. The day before yesterday, on October the 28th, the head of European diplomacy, Josep Borrell, declared that due to the escalation in the Middle East, the Ukrainian conflict now is at the background. What is going on in the Middle East shows that we now have the sense of humanity. We do not speak this much about the war in Ukraine as if it was over, but it is not the case, and it continues with the same intensity. This is what he said. What would you comment on this? To comment Borrell is to read out a diagnosis. We have repeatedly paid attention to the double standards of the European Union, in particular to the declarations made by Borrell and his assessments of the situation around Ukraine and the Middle East. For the European Union, they have one thing in common when it comes to all these tragedies. They could not care less about the people. They are completely indifferent to Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian victims, as well as the destiny of Russians and Ukrainians. The European Union takes care only of their financial and economic advantage, and we could say of their own state. But it is not the case. But of this beautiful blooming garden, in essence, a golden billion, which is focused on the interests of this Anglo-Saxon metropole and nothing more. They want to win political points, to give productive capacity for military complexes, to form coalitions, which would enable them to prolong, just for some time, the sense of being this blooming garden surrounded by jungles. I think that this is what they call the rules-based order, or better to say the rule-based order of the dictatorship, of force, of brutality, and they want to subdue as many countries of the global south and the east as possible. When it comes to the Ukrainian conflict, I think that this was an open-hearted confession made by Josep Borrell. In essence, the European Union does everything possible to prevent the military action from coming to an end. They do everything to prolong, to expand them. To this end, the European Union sends arms, train Ukrainian militants. They make up some legal anti-norms in order to expel Ukrainian migrants, to send them to the front. They recruit their own citizens to the Ukrainian army. They spread out Ukrainian propaganda, cover war crimes and terrorist attacks committed by the Zelensky regime. The early political solution of the Ukrainian crisis, and Borrell has confessed this repeatedly, is not in the interest of the European Union leaders and American supervisors, because they earn money on the death of Ukrainians and Ukraine destruction. They loot our assets. They are busy finding solutions to their own problems at the expense of others. This goes in the spirit of colonialism, which is transformed into neocolonialism. One more question. By the end of 2025, Russia envisages increasing supplies of the Russian gas to Uzbekistan through main gas pipelines.
которые замедляют развитие российско-узбекского энергетического сотрудничества. И если такие проблемы будут возникать в будущем, то насколько эффективно мы можем решать их по линии взаимодействия внешнеполитических ведомств и в рамках работы Российско-Узбекского делового совета.
Ну, я напомню, что в 2023 году, в октябре, президенты России, Казахстана и Узбекистана дали старт поставкам российского природного газа в Узбекистан транзитом через Казахстан в рамках двухлетнего контракта между «Газпромом» и «Узгастрейд». И на сегодняшний день объемы превышают, я имею в виду объемы поставок, превышают покупают 5 миллиардов кубометров газа, там 5,1. Кроме того, российские компании «Газпром», «Лукойл» успешно реализуют ряд проектов освоения газовых месторождений на территории самого Узбекистана. В планах сторон дальнейшее постепенное наращивание сотрудничества в газовой сфере. Каких-либо проблем, которые бы замедляли развитие двустороннего энергетического сотрудничества, кооперации, честно говоря, в наших двусторонних отношениях нет. Все вопросы решаются конструктивно. Тема энергетики включается в повестку дня переговоров как на высоком уровне, так и в межведомственном формате, на экспертном уровне. Перспективы взаимодействия в этой сфере обсуждались в ходе состоявшихся в текущем году встреч, я имею в виду государственный визит президента Российской Федерации, который имел место 26-28
with NATO allies, that they're every bit as concerned about this development as we are. And so in terms of what the response will look like, that is something we're consulting with them on right now. The South Korean foreign minister and the South Korean defense minister, another important ally of ours, will be in town tomorrow to meet with Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin. I can guarantee you that this development will be a significant topic of discussion in those meetings as well.
So if those troops would be ending up in the fronts, like in Kursk, for example, will Ukraine be allowed to use weapons provided by U.S. and NATO allies?
I'm just not going to get into a hypothetical. I'm not going to get into a hypothetical. Sorry.
Thank you, Matt. I'm struck by your response to Sean on, you said that you don't want to see the widespread damage that you've seen, but in Gaza, it's total destruction. So anything short of that total destruction would be acceptable? You don't want to see something similar?
Saeed, we want to see a diplomatic resolution.
I'm trying to understand your